Welcome to the Radiant Visalia podcast. Join us at one of our two services, 9 a.m. and 10:45 a.m. Download the Church Center app or visit our website, radiantvisalia.com, to stay connected with us. All right, enjoy.
There is a heavenly city that I'm compelled to find.
I'm going to read from Hebrews chapter 4 as we begin our time this morning. Hebrews chapter 4, starting in verse 14. If you don't have a Bible, we'll throw it on the screen. Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has ascended into heaven, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weakness, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. Let us then approach God's throne, his throne of grace. Let us approach his throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and then find grace in our time of need. We're going to begin a series on prayer this morning that will take us to the summer. And I thought I would speak briefly to the why. Why would we study? I don't know if that question came up. I don't know if you're allowed to say, why are we praying? But I did want to speak to why I feel like this is something we should endeavor to do. Last year, I was so blessed by the Holy Habits series. We did a series last year, this time on spiritual disciplines, and prayer was one of the many disciplines discussed. And my fear was that none of those disciplines made us holy or became habits because we talked about so many things we needed to do. Each and every week we offered a new discipline, and my fear is that none of the disciplines ended up incorporated into our lives because it takes time to chew your food. And my fear was last year that we just kept shoveling stuff into our mouth, and I'm not sure we were able to chew or digest what God was doing. So I wanted to slow down and just focus in on one discipline, the discipline of prayer, and see to it that we grew, see to it that that was incorporated into our lives, right? Chew and swallow before we take another bite was the desire. So we'll talk about talking with God. We'll talk about hearing from God. We'll talk about imaginative prayer, like working with your mind's eye. How many of you heard someone at Radiant say, I got a picture? And you're like, what? You sure? Want to do my best to explain what I think's happening there. We're going to talk about unanswered prayer, hopefully get real about the disappointments we've experienced. We're going to talk about asking for the impossible, what that says about your view of God. We're also going to talk about asking for the little things, parking spots, and what that says about your view of God. We're going to talk about praying for healing, praying for physical healing. We're going to talk about singing prayer. We're going to talk about persisting in prayer. We're going to talk about contemplative prayer, and all do our best to become monks. And we're going to talk about spiritual warfare in prayer, because warfare isn't just a part of the Christian life. Warfare is the Christian life. And so we want to discuss that famous line in Jesus' prayer that says, deliver us from evil. What does that look like and how does that work? So also Lent is upon us. A season on the church calendar where we set aside 40 days leading up to Easter to prepare ourselves for resurrection power. So the other thing is that I just thought, in trying to figure out what we should talk about, I just thought I'm going to talk about that thing that affects everything. Prayer is that thing that can affect everything. Of course, in prayer, I'm not talking about getting things from God. I'm talking about relating to God. I'm talking about keeping company with God. I'm talking about learning to communicate and to commune with God. And that is the thing that can affect everything. Your work life, your home life, your thought life, our impact in this community, all affected by our ability to connect with him. So our connection with him is connected to everything. So why wouldn't we talk about the thing that affects everything? So I want to call us to prayer this morning by using the passage that we just read from Hebrews 4. Let us draw near to God's throne of grace with confidence so that we might receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. So let's start by just saying, let us. Why don't you just slap the person next to you just say, let's do this. Like you're in cahoots, like you're getting ready to jump off something. Let us, as in we all. Let's do this together. Let us draw near to God. To pray is to be human. It's the soul's native language. Everyone prays. Our English word for prayer derives from the Latin word precarious. The reason we pray is because life is precarious. And we know that, right? The coronavirus and a stock market plunge just reminds us of this fragile thing we call life. We're in a precarious situation, so we pray. We feel pinched, pressed. And so as people, we pray. The sudden and unexpected loss of one of Tulare Western's principals this week. He's a colleague of many in our church and a real close friend to a few. Life is precarious. And so we pray. And I think we all know and can testify to the experience of going in the same day from cloud 9 to just the depths of despair. Life is fragile. We're fragile. And so as people, we pray. 1 in 4 people will pray the Lord's Prayer. 1 in 6 will bow to Mecca 5 times a day in prayer. Hasidic Jews are praying right now at the Wailing Wall, wedging little handwritten prayers in between the bricks. But here's the deal. It's not just the religious who pray. To pray is to be human. Everyone prays. One psychologist I read said this: our natural posture is attentive openness to the divine. Our natural posture is attentive openness to the divine. I just love it. That's our natural state. It's nature, not nurture. There is a natural openness to the divine. Dave Grohl, he's the lead singer of the Foo Fighters and the former drummer for Nirvana. He admits to praying when he found out that one of his bandmates had overdosed at a festival. He would walk from the hospital in London where his friend was in a coma. And he says this: I'm not a religious person, but I was out of my mind. I was so frightened and heartbroken and confused that I was walking the streets of London talking out loud to God. I read of a woman who was a militant atheist at the University of Wichita. And late one night, she gazed down at her sleeping baby. That's an important part of the story. She gazed down at her sleeping baby, and she, a militant atheist, was overwhelmed with a desire to give thanks to someone or something for what she knew was obviously a gift. She had no husband. She had no boyfriend to share the moment with, so she whispered a few words of gratitude into the room where she was at. As she said thank you, she noticed the atmosphere changed in her room, and then she said this: wave after wave of liquid love came flooding into the room. And she knelt that night and surrendered her atheism. And she's been a Jesus follower for the last 30 years. There's something in us that needs to come out. And sometimes we don't have words for it, but sometimes it's just, wow. Someone needs to hear this. I need to express it. Thank you. Help. Please. This is the soul's native language. People pray, it's what they do. Because life is precarious. Especially Jesus people. It's what Jesus people do. Jesus, the greatest man to walk the earth, was a man of prayer. And if we're going to follow Christ, if we're going to be like Jesus, if we're going to be his followers, then we're going to have to be given to prayer. There's no giving it a go with Jesus without giving ourselves to prayer. It was his pattern to pray. You can see it all through the gospel records. And I just want to say this, as followers of Jesus, it's not an option for us to opt out of prayer. Just, would you sit with that for a sec? As a follower of Jesus, it is not an option to opt out of a life of prayer. It's not, prayerlessness is not okay. And prayer itself is not an option for us. If we're going to be Jesus people, then we'll have to become people of prayer. That's how this works. So let us together, let us draw near to God. Let's do this. We can't farm this out to the few anymore. That's not what's happening. Let us, everyone, let all, together, let us draw near to God. We're not farming this out to the few. We're not farming this out to the prayer warriors. We're not farming this out to the people who have a tambourine. We're not farming this out to the grannies. Hey, could you just say a word to the big man for me? No, you say a word to the big man for you. Let's all together draw near to God. From the front to the back, our desire is to grow in our ability to articulate what's going on, to grow in our connection, our ability to keep with God and commune with him. Let's grow, let's go together. The Apostle Paul would write to a church, and he had this to say in 2 Corinthians. He's writing to this church who had been praying for him, and he says, "We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about the troubles that we experienced." He hit some trials in the province of Asia. He says, "We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt we had received the sentence of death. But this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead. And he delivered us from such deadly peril, and he will deliver us again. On him we've set our hope, that he will continue to deliver us as you, the church, help us by your prayers. Then many will give thanks on our behalf for the gracious favor granted us in answer to the prayers of many. Paul knew that there was something powerful about the prayers of many. Like, let's, front to back, put our voices in the room. There's something powerful, not about the prayers of few, but the prayers of many. It was the prayers of many that made an impact in his life. So we're no longer, it's not like Paul said, hey, I need the prayers of pastors. If you could get the prayers of pastors, then it'll see me through. I need the prayers of the articulate. I need the prayers of the intelligent. I need the prayers of the intercessors. I need the department of prayer to be praying for me. No, get many people praying, because many people praying makes a difference for me. He understood that there was something powerful when many people started giving it a go. If you're here and you're thinking to yourself already, I don't know what to say. Seems like this comes naturally and easily for others. I don't know what to say. In fact, the place of prayer has been a real point of frustration for me. Some of the best advice I read this week was this: when it comes to prayer, keep it simple, keep it real, and keep it up. Keep going. Keep it simple. Keep it real. Keep it up. There will be growth. Keep it simple. Keep it simple in prayer. This is an invitation that came from Jesus, that we would keep it simple in prayer. That means this: pray what you can, not what you can't. Or pray what you got and not what you ought. That's where we get in trouble. You keep it simple, you keep it real, you keep it up, something will begin to grow. The disciples came to Jesus and they said to him, famously, right, teach us to pray. They noticed something about his prayer life, and you've noticed something about other people's prayer lives where you're thinking, I don't talk to God that way. I don't know how to do what you're doing. And the disciples came to Jesus and they said, teach us to pray. And that's when Jesus gave them an earful and was like, you should know this by now. What's wrong with you? God, what am I going to do with these guys? No, that's not what he said at all. He graciously, compassionately taught them to pray. That's what he did. He gave them what we call the Lord's Prayer. Archbishop Justin Welby said that the Lord's Prayer is simple enough to be memorized by a child and profound enough to sustain a whole lifetime of prayer. It was simple. And he helped them. And it didn't come naturally to them. They had to come to Jesus and say, teach us to pray. And here we are together saying, Lord, teach us to pray. It doesn't come easily. It doesn't come naturally to us. But thank you that you're patient and you're gracious and you're desiring that we would learn from you the ways of prayer. I love that it didn't come naturally or easily for the disciples either. That they had to say, you're going to have to teach me. This is tough. Eventually, these disciples would pray and whole buildings would shake. Eventually, these disciples would pray and blind eyes would be opened. Eventually, these disciples would pray and demons would go. Eventually, these disciples would lead a revival. But initially, they were doing the same thing we're doing. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Eventually, things are shifting, but initially, they're praying simple prayers. Keeping it simple, keeping it real, keeping it up. So let us, from the front to the back, learn to pray. And let us, as disciples, be taught to pray. In March, we've set forth a rhythm. You can see it on your bulletin. But we're going to pray together. We're going to pray and fast together each Tuesday for the month of March. We're going to pray in Amigo Row from 6 to 7 a.m. We're going to pray from 12 to 1 p.m. And we're going to pray from 5 to 6 p.m. Those are during meals on purpose. If you don't pray well by yourself, neither do we. So let's come together. Let us come together and let us learn to pray. Come and join us on Tuesdays early. Come join us on your lunch. Come join us before dinner. But let us come together in prayer. Let us, and then it goes, draw near, right? Let us draw near. I'm not looking to draw near to prayer. I'm looking to draw near to God. I'm uninterested in prayer. Prayer is a means to an end. I'm interested in God. Prayer's a means to connect with Him. So let us draw near, not to formulas or methods. Let us draw near to God in prayer. Paul Miller writes this. I think it's a great quote. Oddly enough, many people struggle to pray because they're focusing on praying and not on God. That's profound. Prayer is not what we're going for in this series on prayer. God is what we are going for in this series on prayer. Ultimately, we're after God. We want to know Him. We want to relate to Him. We want to connect with Him, and communication is a means to that end. Prayer is not primarily about getting stuff from God. Prayer is not ultimately about petition or asking. Certainly, relationship with Him, like relationship with anyone else, will involve making requests or asking. But prayer is not ultimately about getting things from God. Prayer is about getting to know God. Getting God. That's what we want, and that's what we're after in prayer. A sort of keeping company with God. I turned 40 a month ago, and I keep bringing it up because every time I mention it, someone goes, "Oh, I forgot his 40th birthday," and then I get another card. So I'm hoping to get cards for the next 6 months by mentioning my birthday. If you forgot about it, my office is like right over there. And so my wife had a 40th birthday for me, and at the party I had some dear friends share stories and communicate their love for me, their appreciation of me, and just tell old stories, some of which I couldn't remember. And after my party, I had a friend who was at the party take me to lunch and share with me that while others were sharing their stories, he realized that he didn't know me like that. Have you ever had that moment with a friend, with someone you love, where someone's talking about them in a way and you realize, I don't know them in that way? And then it dawned on this friend of mine that he wasn't okay with that. It's not okay for me to not know you like that. I want to be able to share stories. I want to have this together. And I think although he didn't say it because we're two like grown men, I think what he was trying to say is I want to be closer to you. And I left that lunch and I just found myself thinking or realizing, this is how I feel in my relationship with God. I think this is how we feel in our relationship with God. I hear people talk about Him, and as a pastor go, I don't know Him like that. I hear people share stories about Him. Oh, and then this one time, and I realize that's not the relationship that I have with God. And then every once in a while, I'll get bold enough to say, I'm not okay with this. I don't want this. I want to know you. I want a relationship with you. I want to be closer with you than I am. I say these things like you've saved me and you're the most important thing in my life, but ultimately I experience distance. And I don't want to draw back. I want to draw near. I want to be bold enough to say, I want to know you like that. I want a friendship with you that looks like that. I read the Bible, I read these stories, and these feel so foreign to me. And I want in. I want that kind of relationship with you. I think this is what Habakkuk captured in his prayer when he said this to God. I've heard of your fame. I heard the stories. I was there at your 40th birthday, God. And I heard people talk about you affectionately. I've heard of your fame. I stand in awe of your deeds. But renew them in our day. In our time, make them known. I want to know you. I want to be closer than I am with you. And I think that resonates for all of us here. I want something more than what I have with God. I want to know him. And here's the good news. The word on the street is that he likes you too. The word on the street is that he wants to draw near to you. The word on the street is that he initiated the lunch, not you. That he first loved you. That he too wants these types of stories. That he too wants this type of connection with you. That he too wants to laugh and have inside jokes and be able to say, remember when? Oh man, I do. I'd rather forget that, but I remember that. Let us draw near to God. Draw near to prayer. I don't really like prayer, if I'm honest, but I love Jesus. And if we can get to him in prayer, oh man, let's do it. He's amazing. So in prayer, we're drawing near to God himself. This is about relating to God, relationship with God, not getting stuff from God. I was thinking about this, that when we understand prayer as communication with God or relating to God or keeping company with God, if that's your understanding of prayer, then you're less likely to describe prayer as not working. Because the truth is that many of us don't pray, not because we don't have time or we don't have the words. You just don't think it works. You don't believe it's effective because you find time and you find ways to do what you think is effective. You don't think it works. Or maybe you would describe prayer as not working. But I find that when someone describes prayer as not working, that potentially they have prayer framed up as getting stuff from God. And you're less likely to describe prayer as not working when you understand prayer is about relating to God, knowing God, keeping company with God. Let me help explain that to you because I think this is important. So I didn't drive to church this morning in my 1965 van because it doesn't work. I would have if it started. The weather's nice. I can't drive it without smiling. It doesn't work. That's why I didn't drive here in it. I didn't lock my front door because the lock on my front door didn't work. It doesn't work because I hung the door and there's something wrong with it. So anyone at any time can break into my home. I cannot lock the front door. So my van doesn't work. The front door doesn't work. But what if I said to you, I don't talk to my wife because it doesn't work? Well, then you're not like a pastor, but you would say to me, are you sure that talking to your wife doesn't work? Or is it the way that you talk to your wife that doesn't work? No, it doesn't work. I told her to make me a sandwich, and she did. It doesn't work. She didn't make me a sandwich. And you would pastor me and you would say, hey bro, maybe it's your brain that doesn't work. You can't like march in and say, make me a sandwich. That's not the way this works, okay? So don't describe communication as not working. It's potentially the way you communicate that's not working. If you've described prayers, this doesn't work, I don't have time for this, maybe reframe prayer and understand it to be a way of relating to a person. And you'll work on that till the day you die. This isn't about understanding a formula. I've tried that with my wife too. This plus this equals this. That's not true either. That's not how this works. Prayer is something more than that. Matthew 6 in the Message, please hear Jesus' words as translated by Eugene Peterson concerning prayer. Here's what I want you to do. Find a quiet, secluded place so you won't be tempted to role play before God. Just be there as simply and honestly as you can manage. The focus will shift from you to God, and you will begin to sense His grace. The world is full of so-called prayer warriors who are prayer ignorant. They're full of formulas and programs and advice, peddling techniques for getting what you want from God. Don't fall for that nonsense. This is your Father you're dealing with, and He knows better than you what you need. With a God like this loving you, you can pray very simply. You can pray simply. And you can pray as honestly as you can manage. Because He knows what's going on. So there's no use to speaking to Him in King James. Oh Lord, thou art. He knows what's going on. So we can speak to Him. We can keep it real. That's a part of drawing near. That's a part of drawing close. You want to keep a distance, keep it shallow. You want to draw near real quick, then you get real. In any relationship that it's growing in intimacy, it's growing in trust, and it's growing in honesty. There's an increased level of honesty if you're going to draw near to God. I love this quote from Philip Yancey. He says, do I sense the presence of God? Do I sense the presence of God is the question we always ask. But does He sense the presence of me in prayer? We're all guilty. I've heard people pray and thought, what happened to you? You were talking normal, and then you started talking to God, and it changed. I don't know where you went. I wonder if God's saying that to us in prayer. What in the world? You've got all this going on in your life. You're going to talk to me like that? Where are you? The question is, where is God? And God might be saying to us, where are you? Why are you now talking with an accent? I know you. You need to stop this. What's really funny to me, I guess we could laugh or cry, but this is true for me. That when I sense that I'm showing up, I quickly sense that He's showing up. It's when I'm real that He becomes very real. When you're distant, He seems really distant. When you're honest, He seems to show up. And I've seen this a few times in my life. Let us draw near to God's throne. Let us draw near to God's throne. We don't start in prayer with our situation. We don't start in prayer with where we're seated. We don't start in prayer by looking down and at me and at my circumstance. We start in prayer by looking up to God and to God's throne. This isn't By the way, to God's throne, it's not empty. Well, let's look to God's chair. No. Who sits in God's throne? God sits in God's throne. It's God who sits in God's throne. Let's draw near to him. Let's look to him. Some of our prayer doesn't work because we start with our pathetic situation and not him seated over our situation. Who's God? That's the question in prayer. Who's God? I don't want to start with where I'm at. I want to start with where he's at. Let's draw near to where he's at because it's better than where we're at. And so if you're just rehearsing your pathetic situation over and over again and you're out of touch with where God is at and where God is seated, don't start there. Start by looking up. I know your Sunday school teacher taught you to look down, but Jesus looked up in prayer. He looked up to the heavens. I know that we were taught to fold our hands so we don't screw around. But I think this is our posture. This is our posture in prayer. Well, there's this situation. And just rehearsing the situation before God, out of touch with who he is and where he's seated. Listen, I have a hunger for us in the weeks to come to touch great power in prayer. I want to believe that it's effective. I want to know that he's seated and he has authority to do something about the situation. Which really, here's the truth of it. Here's the truth of it. If we're going to come to God's throne, and it's God who sits on God's throne, the big question for us in prayer is who's God? Who is God? You're going to have to attend to your view of God. Who is he? Frowning father? Mostly upset? Oh, good luck drawing near to him. You have to tend to your view of God. Is he weak, wishing he could do something about the situation? Gosh, man, I hear you, bro. Oh, that's tough. My hands are tied on this deal. It's complicated. I'll explain it later in eternity because it'll take eternity to explain the situation. Is he weak? Or is he a gloriously strong father who wants you in his presence? You're going to have to attend to your view of God if our prayer life is going to grow. Who is he? Well, Trav, it's not even a throne. It's like a vending machine in heaven. I don't come to God or God's throne. I come to a vending machine. And if I hit it just right, it drops the Doritos. You're going to have to, how am I framing God? That's where Jesus taught us to start. He said, when you pray, start with your petitions. No, start with your confession. I'm suck and I screwed it up again. No, start with God. Start with God. Our Father who's in heaven, holy is your name. You're separate. You're seated. You're not affected the way I'm affected by this situation, yet your heart goes out to me. You're gloriously strong. You're my Father, and you want relationship with me. That's where Jesus said to start. We get an idea about God, about our view of him, when we're told that his throne is a throne of grace. God's throne has a name. Did your dad name his lazy boy? God's throne has a name. It's a throne of grace. Grace being God's unmerited favor. That means we come with confidence. Then if it's unmerited favor, then who gets to draw near to God's throne? Who gets to go to God's throne? Well, Jesus made this real clear when he said, come to me, all who are well-spoken. Come to me, all who are crushing it in life. Come to me, all of you who have straight teeth. Come to me, all of you winners who are up from last quarter. Come to me if you've got it together. No, that's not the invitation, because it's a throne of grace, not performance. Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden. If you're weary, if you're heavy laden, you can come to me. All. Not even the people, oh, come to me if you're weary and heavy laden because you're feeding the poor. No, some of you are burned out because of your own dumb doing. And Jesus would still say, come on, come to me. It's a throne of grace. If you're weary, if you're heavy laden for any reason, you can approach my throne. He can act from his throne, and he can order from his throne. But here's the point of Hebrews 4. He can empathize. Tempted in every way that we were tempted, yet without sin. He's been where we've been, and he can understand. So let's draw near to his throne of grace. Let's do it with confidence, church. With an increasing boldness. This is my prayer for this series on prayer. That we would pray sooner than we do. That it wouldn't be an afterthought. That we would pray stronger with greater boldness. That we would come to God with a greater confidence. No, he wants me here. This is where he wants me. That we would grow in our confidence that he hears us and that we can hear from him. How many people, do you want that? I hope that this is stirring some sort of an appetite for you. I want to grow in confidence. I want to grow in boldness. I don't want to wait to be asked, will you pray? I want to be on my toes going, can I pray? That I would be doing the asking because I had a deep belief that God hears and wants to act on our behalf. That we'd be leaning forward and not leaning out. That we'd grow in a greater confidence to ask him questions. Confident in our identity and confident in our place before him. Knowing where he's placed us. Asking for his hand of intervention. I want like our prayer swagger to increase. Like a confidence. Like we don't draw near like, oh, dodged lightning, dodged lightning again. You know. Run the gauntlet so you can get close to me. I want us to draw near with a confidence. A confidence that comes not from our record, our ability to pray. But let's be confident to come before him that we may receive what? Mercy, and then find grace in our time of need. That we would find formulas. No, that we would find mercy. That we would get good at prayer. No, that we would get good grace. We're not going for good prayer here. We're actually going for mercy. We're going for grace in our time of need. You'll never not need God's grace. It's never going to be like, okay, I got it, man. You took me through that 12 weeks and I can pray. No. So that we could get, not good at prayer, but get God's good grace. That's what we're going for. We need God's mercy. Man, we can't agree on much, and this is going to get worse as the election approaches. We can't agree on much, but we can agree this is a great time of need. This is a great time of need. And those that know their God will be strong and do exploits. This isn't a formula. Those that know God, know the character of God, will be strong and do exploits. This is a great time of need. And you know what we need? Mercy. God, have mercy on us. That's the cry. Mercy, Lord. We don't see it straight. We deserve something. And please, Lord, don't give it to us. We need your mercy, Lord. And we need your grace. Grace is that which empowers us to do what we cannot do. May we find not formulas, and may we not get prayer good or get it right, but may we get God's grace. May we get more mercy in this time of need. Our great high priest can empathize with us. Would you stand, worship team? Would you come? Hebrews 5 says this about Jesus and his prayer life while on earth. It says in the days of his flesh, when Jesus was here, he offered up prayers and he offered up supplications. He prayed with loud cries and Jesus prayed with tears. He prayed to him who was able to save him from death, and he was heard because of his reverence. Help me out here. Did Jesus die? Yeah. This passage says that he's crying. His prayers coming forth with loud tears. And it says that God heard him. And he still went to the cross. Although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. And being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him. We're going to end our time looking to God, looking to God's throne. But we get to God's throne and we get to come before God's throne with confidence because of Jesus, our great high priest. The God-man. That's what a priest does. Represents God to man, represents man to God. And Jesus had his hand on both of us. And it says that he lived the life that we couldn't live, and then he died the death that we deserved. And now it says that his record, his righteousness has become our righteousness. The reason we approach God with any sort of swagger is because Jesus' record has been given to us. We had the week that he had. I'd trade in the week that you had. I don't know about your week, but I'd get rid of that. We've received the righteousness of God through the life of Christ, so we come with confidence.
Thanks for listening. We want to be a resource for you as you walk with Jesus. So please connect with us at radiantvisalia.com. Until next time.
There is a heavenly city that I'm compelled to find. Though I love the flowers and trees and the smell of the grinding sea and all the beautiful things here in life. And I